behoves America, which has stronger advantages than any of the other countries that we think of as part of the West. Because the big difference is, for America, this is a conventional war. You go to faraway places, you kill foreigners. In Europe, it's a civil war. It's subjects of the Queen who blow up the London Tube. It's citoyens de la République Française who riot and burn and torch the cities of France every night. It's a civil war for them. And so we have to understand that the planet is changing very fast, and that America needs to use its moment now, or we really will face a new dark ages. Thank you.
Mark, I think, would you be able to stay and answer some questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. So you don't get off the hook that easily then, right? I can tell you from my reading of the book, there's so much more to it than Mark was able to touch on today, so you really should do yourself the favor, if you haven't already, to get a copy and read through it. And there's some questions that I would like to ask you in deference to the group here. Why don't you all go ahead and you can just take questions on your own, and I'll step up when it's time to go.
Okay. Yes, the lady at the front.
Yes, thank you. Haley Dale, Heritage Foundation, reader of your book. It's terrific. You take your place in a long, distinguished line of people who have predicted the decline of the West. Now, I'm sure I'd agree with you that this time it's for real. But still, you must have given this some thought as you were writing, whether the decline of the West, as we've seen it and it's been written about over the past 100 years, is this a chapter in it, or is this a different phenomenon altogether, or are we in for a revival of the West perhaps at some point?
Well, I think it is part of a continuum. You know, if I wanted to do a big kind of overview of it, I would say, and I think, by the way, we should distinguish between what we mean when we talk about the West, because it's true that, you know, if you say to yourself, well, what's the big deal about losing Germany and Italy and these countries have all done terrible things? It's true. Spain, Portugal, Greece were dictatorships a generation ago. You go back a generation before that, and Germany and France and Italy were dictatorships. And you can say, well, what do these guys have to teach the rest of the planet anyway? They've very clearly failed at a certain level as nation states for most of modern history. So I always distinguish between they're what I would call the cultural West. You know, that Goethe and Beethoven and Mozart and Michelangelo's David. They are part of our inheritance. But I have a slightly, in terms of the political West, the countries that have created the institutions by which this planet operates, the global economy operates, which make it possible for me as a writer, for example, to enforce my copyrights in most parts of the world, that derives from a narrower Anglo-American tradition, and that is now in danger. I think if you talk about the West in general terms, in the Battle of the Somme in 1916 on the First World War, the carnage of the First World War, the slaughter, I think the ruling classes of Europe felt they lost their moral authority, and they never recovered it. And a kind of infection took hold in which a kind of elite self-loathing percolated ever further down in society. And I think that indirectly gave rise to a lot of the features we see in our world today, where we have a successful standard of living, we have better health care, longer life expectancy, greater range of economic opportunities than any other people in human history. And yet if you go to the typical grade school in this country, you're taught that it's all terribly wicked and it was accomplished by doing terrible things to terrible people. And I think that so I think in a sense the sort of metastasized self-loathing that we face today has its roots really, I think, in the First World War and a kind of crisis of confidence from which those ruling classes never really recovered. Yes, the lady in the centre there.
Hi, my name is Deborah Weiss, and I'm a fellow with the Center for Security Policy and a 9/11 survivor from the World Trade Center attacks. My question is, how can we make CEOs of companies like Burger King and Nike understand that there are values more important than whether or not they lose a few dollars from Muslim customers, since they've been caving in every time Muslim front groups pressure them to change the little sign on their product that, if you stand on your head with your leg wrapped behind your ear, it sort of looks like the word Allah. And then they just seem to cave in on everything. And what can we do about that?
Well, I think, in fairness to them, that it's not an economic thing. If you're being boycotted, I believe the Southern Baptists have been boycotting Disney Disney did some film about a gay priest, I think, in 1994, and the Southern Baptists boycotted them for years afterwards, and it made no difference. Disney didn't care. It's not an economic issue. The guy at Burger King, if he leaves the swirl that if you crane your neck and stand on your head looks a bit like Allah, he's scared that there are going to be people waiting outside Burger King who will kill him and kill his employees, and that the whole site is. I was up in my part of New Hampshire, an 85-year-old granny put her foot on the wrong pedal and drove through McDonald's in Woodsville, New Hampshire. They're flimsy buildings. You lean on them, you go through them. But like the carnage, this granny driving through it, there was like burger patties hanging everywhere. It was like a horrific sight, and I think that's what the Burger King guy is picturing when he has a dispute with an aggrieved Muslim customer. And so I think that's not something that Burger King and Nike can stand against, because if you threaten to kill someone, you will get taken seriously. And that's the difference between Catholics protesting the play about Jesus being gay that was on Broadway a couple of years ago, and these Mohammedans protesting the cartoons. Because the Muslims, when they say behead the enemies of Islam, these guys think they mean it. When the Catholics boycott a play, who cares? And so you have to make that clear, and that's where the media comes in. We in the media, we talk about our courage all the time. The cartoons offered an opportunity to show some courage. These cartoonist kids in Copenhagen, they're getting threatened in their schoolyards by these fellows. And we should have said, look, this newspaper, none of us has ever heard about it, but we're going to publish the cartoons in the New York Times and Le Monde and the Sydney Morning Herald and the Times of London and the Times of India. We're going to publish these newspapers in every paper, these cartoons in every newspaper in the world. And if you want to kill us, you're going to have to kill us all. We talk in the media about our courage all the time. Here was an opportunity to show some, and we didn't. And so I think we, in a sense, are partly responsible for creating the climate of intimidation in which the lights go out on free speech every week now. I'm proud to say my publishers at Regnery publish this book. They publish a lot of books on this issue. Every week I hear from publishers in London, publishers in Sydney, publishers in Paris, about these guys turning down French, British, Australian authors writing about this subject because those publishers are scared to publish them. That's how the lamps go out all over the world one by one. Yes, down here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Steyn. My name is Damon Pace. Just a huge fan of your books and commentary. Being familiar with your writings and with your book, what makes you optimistic that the United States will prevail against radical Islam? Here in this country, the Democratic majority, of course, is in power, along with the multicultural mindset. Many Americans do appear to be tiring of the war and want to withdraw from that region. In addition, in my opinion, the secularist agenda does seem to be rising. Many of the same conditions that exist in Europe already. With that being said, what makes you optimistic that America will not have the same fate as certain European countries?
Well, I'm not optimistic. I don't think this nation should be a 50-50 nation, because essentially the Democratic Party is the European Party. It wants to embrace, at an economic level, ideally, I mean, it has to be cautious about it, but it sees the natural destination of the advanced Western democracy as being a lot closer to Sweden than to Mississippi. And I think if America got closer to Sweden than to Mississippi, then we would find ourselves in the same dreadful situation that the Europeans are in. So I'm not optimistic. This shouldn't be a